Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Get Behind Me Now, Stay There. Today we have on author Dr. Frank Romano, author of Love and Terror in the Middle East. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you folks today.
Well, we're really glad to have you here, and it's quite a coup for us. And Frank has written this book, Love and Terror in the Middle East, which is, let's not get too confused with the title, because it's got quite a provocative title, but I actually haven't read the book. It's a little bit of a personal journey story. It was a lot more than I thought it would be. It's not a documentary. You know, there is quite a bit of a story there, and maybe you can enlighten our listening audience to that.
Yeah, well, the love part is...
I was going to be a little reluctant to say that.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, well, there's love, and I guess you can say it's like the I Ching. There's love, and then there's hate, or the love and terror part. The love part, I've just been blessed to be able to work with Jews, Muslims, and Christians in a very contested area, probably the most contested area in all the Middle East, which are the West Bank refugee camps like Jenin and others. And I've been able to get in Israeli Jews into the West Bank, which is illegal for them under IDF rules, but they're getting them through so they can meet and dialogue with Muslims, Palestinian Muslims and Christians, and people from all over the world. I have internationals going in with me. That's been fantastic, and I see progress step by step through grassroots efforts, and not keeping politicians or religious leaders out, but not taking their lead, not allowing them to lead, because too much agenda, as we see in the world, dictated by politicians and basically lining their own pockets. We focus on individual action for peace, and that's the love part. The terror part is that these efforts that I take and with friends to mobilize people, to clarify misunderstandings through dialogue, through contact, haven't come without cost. In fact,
quite a high cost.
Exactly. I mean, Charlie, just about under a year ago, a good friend of mine, his name is Giuliano Mercamis, who is originally from Israel, an Israeli Jew, a very famous actor, gave up that career to go into the West Bank to start a theater group. He had helped me, advised me, how to engage in these dialogues, what language to use in the West Bank and in Israel, was murdered. My friend was murdered, and I just was... It was incredible because I was writing this just in the middle of the chapter. I was writing about our work together in the West Bank. I took a break, went on news, found that there was he calls himself 100% Israeli, 100% Palestinian, living in Palestine. And so he is the epitome of the interfaith movement. I found out he had been murdered. I went on CNN and discovered this. And a few months later, I returned to the very spot where he was murdered, and I walked. It was very nerve-wracking because it's in the middle of the refugee camp, which is very contested. The area that served the Jenin refugee camp in northern West Bank served as as a center of conflict and resistance to the Israeli soldiers. I walked where he was murdered, and I stayed in and a block later, I stayed a couple, 3 days in the theater group, the theater actually that this man created, and tried to find out what happened to my friend. And my friends from Paris in the U.S. warned me not to do this. I said, well, I owe it to my friend to go into that area to find out what happened to him, because it was still very blurred as to whom would want to kill this man who works with both sides, who works for peace. And I could also discuss how I even got to the Middle East originally through my experiences in Morocco. But maybe you have other questions, Charlie.
Well, actually, I do have a few other questions.
Okay.
And, I want to get to a lot of it. There's a lot to cover. And what I want to do, first of all, is I want to show everyone your book. Now, this is the second edition because it's been flying off the shelves. And here it is. Go down and pick yourself up a copy on Amazon or anywhere fine books are sold. Now, in the book, you do dedicate the book to your friend. And when I was beginning to read it, the part I was thinking about, is you tell the story of you're in Paris and in San Francisco, and what drove you to do all this? And ultimately, you ended up getting divorced. I don't know if it was over that or that was a major contribution to it all. Also, I want to show everyone that before Love and Terror in the Middle East came out, and this is in its 4th edition, so quite the successful writer there, Doctor. And it's The Storm over Morocco. Now, there is quite a story behind this. Now, I've heard it, but I think everyone's really going to be fascinated. So why don't we start at the beginning, as they say, and, just give us a brief overview about, what happened in Morocco, what, got you to Paris, and then where, it all led into present day, which is, with all the things going on in the Middle East. As we know, this is probably one of the most turbulent times in this past year, 2011. In the Middle East, it seems like everyone's getting overthrown, getting killed, getting run out of town. And I know you're right there in the eye of the storm, and you can be the one to enlighten us on that.
Well, as a sort of a transition, Charlie, from what we talked about in the refugee camp, why my friends, they warned me not to go into this area. They were informed about what happened 30 years ago when I went into Morocco. And they advised me not to go into the refugee camp. They thought I was crazy to do it because of other experience I've had with some extremists, which is the underlying story behind Storm over Morocco. Well, I shared with my friends. This is just following my vision, initial vision that I had 30 years ago. I was in Paris studying, and I was going through crisis. This is before I was married, and kind of living a bohemian lifestyle, and taking courses at the University of Paris. And
tough life.
Yeah, well, it was tough for me because I'm pretty much a country boy. Now, I was raised, my family comes from Ashland, Oregon, but I was raised in Santa Rosa, California, worked on farms most of my life, and I went to the city so I could go to law school. Pretty much a country boy and pretty well inundated and by the city rhythm. And Paris is like Manhattan in that regard. And so I said, I'm out of here. I want to get out of school. I was at the Sorbonne studying philosophy, and I left my job as a waiter at the Place de la Sorbonne in Paris and just took off. I said, well, I'm just going to take off and go across North Africa. Maybe I'll get into the Middle East. And I thought I might try to participate in this interfaith movement I heard about. Now, this was in 1978, Charlie. This was a long time ago, 1978.
I remember it.
So I took off, and I headed down, I took trains and finally got into Tangier. Then Casablanca, I was sleeping on the streets. I didn't have much money. And I met this, imam from a local mosque who seemed really like a nice guy. And he said, well, you want to learn about Islam? I can take you into the mosque, and this was one of the...
For our listeners, Iman, why don't you explain that terminology?
Yeah, Iman is equivalent, it's kind of equivalent to a minister or priest in Christianity, or to a rabbi, even though there's a bit different, but you can say he's a religious leader, and an Iman in a mosque, which is the church of the Muslims, he's the leader, he leads the prayers. And so forth. And so he invited me into this mosque, and I thought this was great. This is on one of my lists that I had to do before I went to the Middle East to do interfaith with Muslims, Jews, and Christians. I need to learn about Islam. So I walked into the mosque, and he invited me to stay there. And after a week, I shook hands with the imam, said, "Thank you very much. I'm going to continue my trip across North Africa." Went to the main door, and I'm looking at the door, and there's a guard in front now. The door was open before, and now it's closed, and he's not letting me out. I went back to the imam, nervous and wondering, what's going on. I said, "You've got the wrong guy here. You know what my plans are." And he said, "Well, would you calm down? We want you to learn about the only true religion in the world, and we want you to help recruit for us." He said, and I responded, "Recruit for you? Is this a religion or this is an army?" And no response. And that kind of opened up. That sort of led. That sort of set the tone for the next stage. In the next stage of this this conundrum, you could call it, or quandary, is: am I going to get out of there? Am I going to become one of them? And we got very blurred as to whether I was going to become one of them. They tried very clever brainwashing techniques. the only way out was to escape. And after I began playing the game and stopped asking questions and criticizing because I was livid, being held against my will, I found a way to escape. Got back to the middle of Casablanca where I found a family, thank God, that would hide me because I knew they were looking for me, and until I could flee the country and return to Paris. I never got to the Middle East then, but that vision stayed with me all this time. So that the book Storm Over Morocco ends with me, returning to Paris, and now Paris. I saw Paris in a whole new light now, because now I was a free man, and I embraced.
You valued your freedom.
I almost bent over and kissed the ground when I arrived, and that's the end of Storm Over Morocco, the first book. And so 25 years later, this is still ruminating inside me. I played a very low profile for the next few years. I kept writing down the story, Storm Over Morocco, and eventually got published. But I was really concerned in the beginning that they would follow me because the imam of this mosque in Casablanca, this jihadist extremist group, threatened me. He said, if you're ever to be considered as having abandoned Islam, being a Gentile converted to Islam, in his mind I had converted to Islam,
right,
he could execute me.
Now,
so
how long were you actually under house arrest, so to speak?
Yeah, I was in prison by this imam inside this mosque. It took me about 3 months to get out. Now,
wow.
3 months was an eternity to me because I had made a serious error. Now, my mother and father live in Ashland here, and I didn't have the wherewithal. I violated with the ABCs of what we tell our kids. When we go into strange places, you tell your parents, you tell somebody, and no one knew I was in this place. That added to my stress. So now, 25 years later, I'm in Paris, and I met this Israeli professor at my university. I'm a professor there now, and also a member of the bar, both in California and in France, where I practice law.
Wow.
I met the professor there, and she said, look, in Israel, a professor from Israel, from Tel Aviv in particular, University of Tel Aviv, she said, look, there's all this interface stuff going on. You should come to Israel, and that a light went off in my somewhere in my brain somewhere, and I said, well, gee, maybe I could try to get to the Middle East this time, and just to test it to see if this original vision that took me there, or which led me to attempt to take a voyage there, which I never got there. I got stopped in Casablanca, and I thought, well, maybe I should go there and see if this initial vision was a true vision or just another of my fantasies. So
you decided, okay, 25 years later, you were in France, and you said, now might be a good time to revisit this. The opportunity's presented itself again. Maybe things have settled down enough, and I'm going to pursue this vision and see, hey, is there something to this? Is there something that I can accomplish? Is this, or is this something that, I, as a young man, had a dream?
Exactly, and it was. The vision was based on a dream. And so I said, well, look, now the circumstances have changed. I had brought my wife and kids to Europe, and because of some of my idealism, not just concerning the Middle East, I was also engaged in, obtaining a PhD from the Sorbonne. My first wife left with the kids. But when I finally decided, to take up the offer of this Israeli professor to visit Israel and see if this initial dream was just a fantasy or was leading up to a true vision, I took off. This time, though, I decided. Well, I took off. I was working there, and it was during semester break because I'm a professor there. Now, at the time, I was with a new woman. Several years later, I had met after my first wife had left with the kids and returned to San Francisco. We had a daughter, and one of the reasons why we eventually broke up was the fact I was not only going into Israel, I was going into Palestine, the West Bank. So this time I decided I'm not going to take the route I took before 30 years ago, going through northern Africa. And this time I have a little more money. I took a plane. And instead of
good call.
Instead of being several months traversing North Africa, it only took me 3 or 4 hours, direct flight from Paris to Tel Aviv, and then from Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, from Jerusalem into the West Bank. Now this what took place around 2005, so it's a little bit more than 5 years ago, and I've been going back and forth ever since, 3 or 4 times a year, organizing interfaith groups and dialogues, mainly in the street, through grassroots efforts in Israel and the West Bank. It's been magical. And here I could say this initial vision was a true vision. And I can go, and it's all chronicled, including, how, the challenges with my own family, and eventually my going into Palestine led to a permanent separation with my second partner. And I'm very close to my children, in particular over my traveling to Palestine. But that, again, deciding, trying to find out whether that vision was true or not, and then participating in interfaith and in the interfaith movement in Israel and the West Bank, seeing progress through grassroots efforts, individual, step-by-step individual efforts to communicate and working on projects together, not just talking about, networking. I see has made progress toward peace in the Middle East, and I can't give it up, even though it has come at other cost. Not just have I lost close friends that I talked about before. There's another, an American Jew who I work with. It's a year and a half ago, was murdered in East Jerusalem, but also my own catastrophic fallout on my own family, and some of the sacrifices I had to make to maintain my truth, to be true to the vision I originally have.
And your vision is one of peace. Now here's some photos here, if you can get that, Cyrus.
Now these are actual photos of what I try to do. I try to mobilize people in Israel and the West Bank. Those are all West Bank pictures where I lead marches and dialogues. You can see that we've often, and this is part of the terror part of the book. It's all chronicled in the book that just came out 4 months ago, Love and Terror in the Middle East. And some of the sacrifices have been, we've had to go through a gauntlet of checkpoints and walls. We've been attacked by settlers. Those are, Israeli Jews that have settled in colonies, we could call them, in the West Bank, often confiscating Palestinian land, and often are very much to the right, and very, very, more than orthodox. They're sometimes extremist Israeli Jews, believing that the Torah, their Bible, commands them to do this. They attacked us, and I'm with an international group, including some Israeli Jews that are there to bring together Christian, Muslims, and Jews, whereas they feel, these settlers, already entrenched in the West Bank, that this is their land and we don't belong there. And we've also been arrested by the Palestinian police and interrogated, and by the skin of our teeth, released and also harassed by Israeli soldiers. So that's part of the terror part. It's been a real challenge. But people have called me crazy to do this, but I really feel that I'm contributing in my own way. But with this new book, Love and Terror in the Middle East, what does this offer compared to other books you've read on this subject or other books in general? Well, I'm not a pundit, I don't believe. I'm not an expert in the politics or religion in the Middle East, nor am I a religious leader or expert, nor do I proselytize when I'm there. I'm a field man, I call myself. And I think this book contributes to the extent that it offers a view from a man in the field, really there on the ground, where what's going on really on the ground in Israel and the West Bank with respect to the peace process through grassroots efforts, as opposed to a lot of pundits or intellectuals that have never actually been there, who are very, probably
right.
far
It's
more.
one thing to be, you hit on a good topic there. It's one thing to be, book smart and to, watch a lot, listen to a lot, and therefore you feel you have a grasp on a situation. And, I have read your book, and, you're right. This is Dr. Frank Romano, our man in the field. And it's, for our listeners out there, I want to let everybody know that Frank here is being a little humble. Let me tell you something about this book. I understand that he has a vision for it and what his objectives are. But when you read this book, it is like a huge adventure story. And it's not something you're going to read and say, well, in 1963, Moshe Dayan sat down, and then 1962. It's not a documentary. It's very fast-moving, very invigorating story, and you find yourself turning the pages. This is what I think, of some authors, and you're one of them, that I love about their work is when you're reading the book, you all of a sudden you are there, and you're turning the page because you're like, how am I going to get out of this? What's going on? And what's going around the corner? Oh, Frank, do not open that door. Yeah, I told you that.